Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so happy to have as our guest Dr. Francis Palmer. Dr. Palmer is a medical doctor and also is board certified as a plastic surgeon, and he is the author of What's Your Number? He has spent more than 3 decades helping people look younger by altering outside appearances with surgery. He has now shifted his focus to helping people learn ways to turn back the clock from the inside out. Dr. Palmer is here to discuss studies in aging that shows a person's biological age can actually decrease when we institute healthy living, such as eating the right foods, exercising, and also using specific supplements. He'll be talking about one called AKG, which is Alpha-Ketoglutaric Acid. Dr. Palmer will share information about a simple saliva at-home test so you can determine your levels of AKG. He will also review scientific literature that investigates how maintaining consistent levels can enhance vitality as we age. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Palmer.
Well, thanks, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, let's go back in time and talk about why you became a physician in the first place.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So I actually was a business major. I lived in suburbs of Philadelphia, went to a junior college in Bucks County, and got a bachelor's of business administration. I decided to move to warmer weather. I, like a bunch of other college students, always took spring break down in Florida. And so I was lured by that beautiful sun and warm weather. I applied to the University of Miami to transfer as a junior. They said I have a 2-year waiting list. I said, no, I didn't want to wait. I had friends that were coming back actually from Vietnam. I'm aging myself. And they said San Diego was the place to go. So I packed up some stuff, convinced two friends to go with me. We literally drove from Philadelphia to San Diego. I started San Diego State as a marketing major and had to take some science courses just to finish my my degree as a senior. I absolutely fell in love with chemistry. I always was good with math in high school, but I never really thought anything of it. The next thing I knew, I started to take more and more science and biology courses. I don't know what to tell you, Ellen. It was just all a light switch went off, and I said, I just love this material. And I love the intricacies. I'm a Virgo. I'm very, very focused, and I'd like to think logical. And the next thing I knew, I was the head of the Pre-Med Society at San Diego State. I'm applying to medical school, and I'm now older. I'm significantly 5 years older than most applicants, because when I decided to switch over, I had to redo 4 years of nothing but science courses to meet the requirements for medical school.
Right, because you did business first.
Yeah, I did business first. I didn't have anything. And I started a painting contract business to support myself. So I was not the typical collegiate experience. I would wake up early. I'd get the crew working. I'd go do a full roster of fairly difficult science courses with long labs, finish that, go check the jobs, and go do estimates for the next day. And that continued for 3 or 4 years.
That's really a great story, and self-determination and focus. Now, what led you to become a plastic surgeon?
Yeah, it's not a dissimilar story again. At San Diego State, I had the honor and privilege of shadowing for almost 2 years a general surgeon who basically ran the student health facility there. And, that's a large campus. There's 30-some thousand students there. Had a really great student health facility. And I just thought, this seems like a perfect fit of medicine with my personality, because I like to get in there and do things. I like to make things happen, and I don't mind accepting responsibility on someone else's behalf. And so I saw some articles at that time. It was revolutionary. It was the transfer of people who had lost their large toe, which their thumb, and it becomes very difficult for them to function because you really need that opposing force of your thumb. And so they were transplanting the large toe to replace it, and it was just transforming these people's lives. And I remember taking a copy of that scientific article with me to my medical school interviews. And people would say, how'd you get into medicine? I told them. Why did you do it? I said, I just really believe this is what I'm supposed to do, even though I'm 5 years older than everybody else. And then what do you want to do? I'd pull out an article and I'd say, I want to do something like this. I want to make a real difference in someone's life.
That is such a great story. It's really, profound, because it shows how somebody who started off in a completely different thing took a path that you were almost led upon. And now you are actually world renowned for your work as a plastic surgeon. But now you are switching your focus once again to still about looking younger, but you're talking about doing it from the inside out.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it appears that way, but it's because it's just so typical. We really don't know a lot about people. So on the surface, it certainly looks that way. I've had a storied international career as a facial plastic surgeon. I was head of facial plastics at USC for a decade. But I've always been interested in research. I remember reading articles, scientific journals, as a college student at San Diego State about vitamin C supplementation and how it could impact aging and health. And for the last 30 years, I've actually been involved with research and development, whether it's a medical device company, a biopharmaceutical company, a nutraceutical or cosmeceutical. I even have patents on some of these things that I'd helped develop. So I've always been interested and fascinated in the discovery and why things work and why they don't work, and then the scientific process of how you find that out, and then in a product, how you help develop that to something finally will help the consumer. And I think the book was a transition for me. I published it in 2009. And the reason I published the book wasn't for self-gratification. I published the book because at that time I had already been practicing for 2 decades. I was somewhat distraught with the level of unreliability that people would get when they were seeking some type of aesthetic medical procedure or treatment. I didn't understand it. I thought there has to be a basis for how we evaluate beauty so that everybody understands and recognizes it. Because if I can't do that, I can't tell you how I can alter your appearance in a positive manner if I can't decide what you look like right now. And so it started out to be sort of an operational guide, a roadmap of how for 20 years I made people consistently more naturally attractive. And then if you read the book, read the preface first, because I'm nothing if not painfully honest. And I went through the transformation of writing the book, which took me 3 years, and I rewrote it 5 or 6 times. And it's because I kept adding in things that I never thought would be in it. And so the book talks about all the different ways that people can improve themselves, both inside and out, so they can become the very best versions of themselves.
So wait a minute, Dr. Palmer. The book that you're referring to now is called What's Your Number? And let me reintroduce you so our listeners know where they are. And you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and also on all other kinds of podcast venues, such as iHeartRadio and many more. I'm Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse. And today my guest is renowned plastic surgeon, and his name is Francis Palmer, medical doctor. He's talking about his book, What's Your Number? But also new research in what we might call looking great and feeling great as we age. So thank you so much. So you were talking about what's your number, and you were sharing that information, Dr. Palmer.
Right. So in doing some mental exercises about how things would impact your appearance and how your appearance impacts your daily life, the book became a much larger roadmap about how people can examine different aspects of their life, whether it's their appearance, whether it's their relationships, whether it's their health, and do things, the vast majority of them non-surgical. So there are many, many, many things I believe that people can do that can make positive impacts in their lifestyle, their health span, their longevity. And so this leads us all the way back to what I do now. Now I've retired from that practice a couple of years ago and am a chief medical officer for one of the companies that has a product that does exactly those type of things. It helps improve you from the inside out, which gets us back to the recent study that we wanted to talk about.
Well, that's an excellent thing to share, because I know that many people may not have heard of alpha-Ketoglutaric acid. And what is the difference between just that and something that I know you talk about, which is a combination with calcium?
Yeah. So AKG, as you said, has been around forever. It's at least 40 years old, and it was alpha-ketoglutarate is a supplement that a lot of bodybuilders discovered because it seemed to help muscles heal from a rigorous workout. But now it has an explosion of scientific studies that are being done out there on its additional benefits on aging, on health-related issues. The supplement that's mentioned in the study, it was a recent published study in aging that showed an average of 8-year reduction in biological age when people took this proprietary blend of calcium. It's calcium AKG with vitamin A for men and vitamin D3 for women. And that formula was specifically designed through 4 to 5 years of various mouse studies showing the benefit of results of longevity and health span and health for that particular formulation versus AKG alone. So it's very important.
I know that actually these studies there've been articles in it in the New York Times. They are something that people actually can read for themselves as well. And how was the study done, and what were some of the outcomes?
Yeah, so there were 42 individuals. This is what we call real world data. So it was 42 individuals that were taking Rejuvent that at the beginning sent away a home saliva sample, which is the easiest way to test for DNA methylation. And I'll talk about that in a second. At the beginning, then they took the supplement from 4 to 10 months. The average was 7 months. And their biological age reduced an average of 8 years.
Well, what would that mean, biological age?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I want to tie it in real quickly for everybody so we don't run out of time. There's 2 ways that you can measure your age. One is your chronological age. It's simple, right? You take today's date, you subtract your birth date, that's your age. The biological age, though, is the age that you act. And I'm not talking behavioral wise. I'm talking about how old do your biological and cellular functions act. And this is one time when you want to act immature, right? You want to be 40 and have your cellular body functions act at a 20-year-old level. That would be ideal. That's the 40 is a new 20 or the 60 is a new 40. That's what that means. And so you can measure that with a home saliva test. It tests for the methylation amounts and patterns of the DNA. Now, I'll tie this in really quickly. As we age, we lose the amount of AKG that's naturally made in the body. Between 40 and 80, it can drop by 10-fold. So you might wind up with only 10% of what you had before. This is reflected in the amount of the DNA methylation, which in turn has been shown by scientists in multiple studies to be well correlated with longevity. So biological age is a way to look at longevity and aging without waiting for that, the whole lifetime of individuals.
That's a good explanation of the difference between those two. And I know a lot about the methylation pathways. Also, we look at those, looking at SNPs in terms of somebody's ability to methylate, for instance, their own B vitamins.
Right.
And that seems to vary with a lot of things, such as genetics. So it's a very good thing to know.
Well, it turns out that it regulates the genetic expression, right? So the DNA is a roadmap that says this is the way your cells are going to function, and they're going to function at this level. And if that were all that was involved, we wouldn't be talking about that. But there's multiple other factors. There's biological and environmental factors that can influence that. And one of them is the DNA methylation, because it's basically, think of it as a light switch. It turns on and off the ability for that gene to be expressed. And if you need that gene expressed for your health to be maintained or for you to be youthful, then that's a problem. AKG actually helps turn that around and reduces the amount of DNA methylation, which is then reflected.
Well, wait a minute. That's very interesting to me. And it's new information for me, too. That's why I love doing this radio show, because it seems like you're saying that there's a genetic expression. I guess some people have varying amounts of abilities to have correct methylation. And yet, if they become deficient in AKG, which would normally be naturally occurring, but is reduced because of age and I'm sure other factors, that by replacing that AKG, even by taking a supplement, that you can change that methylation ability.
Yes, that's exactly
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's why the paper is so amazing. And there'll be other papers. And I think the final thing for this, for people to understand, is AKG is made in the body, and you can't get it from food. It has to be a supplementation. And so, again, testing with during mouse studies, various numbers of different formulations of AKG. The specific one, which is proprietary to this place, and Rejuvent.com, is where the calcium AKG that has a specific time release, because it's also important about releasing it in the gut so it doesn't get disrupted in the stomach. So there's a bunch of different things that would separate this from the AKG that people can just sign on to the internet and buy anywhere.
So now, in terms of the testing that you did with the home saliva sample, and we should really at this juncture let people know where they could find out more if they'd like to after they're listening to our show.
Yeah, so go to Rejuvent.com, REJUVANT.com, and you'll be able to learn more about the studies. There's other studies in there as well, and then all the information about this specific brand of AKG that was used in this.
And
study.
People can also find you at drpalmer.com, just drpalmer, PALMER.com, and that we will have a link to on our archive after today's show. Now, beyond testing, what you've shared with us that you tested in that study, what about any other parameters that you might link to biological aging, like amount of energy, sleeping well, things like that? Were any of those looked at?
Yeah, they were, and they'll continue to be looked at. And, those are observational data points. So they looked at them not only to see if there was any difference in lifestyle changes. So unlike other studies, Real quick, there was another study just published in Aging where they used different supplements, and it was a very rigorous 12-month study that people joined, and they had to increase their exercise, they had to increase their sleep, decrease their stress, eat a very specific diet, have probiotics, and take supplements. And they
that sounds like a winning combination there, Dr. Palmer.
Yeah, but listen, here's the kicker. Their biological age only reduced by 2 years. So 2 years making all those, and I'm not saying you don't do it, because if anybody knows me and they know what I talk about, it's always do everything you can to help.
And also how you look, if they see you picture.
Yeah, so
we can tell you're doing all that stuff.
it reduced the biological age by only 2 years, and taking the specific proprietary calcium AKG without making any lifestyle changes they were able to reduce the biological age by 8 years. That's a 400% increase.
So what are some of the factors that would be measured in terms of determining your biological age?
Yes. Well, that's the DNA methylation because they correlate, right? So that's how you do it. And there's multiple companies that'll do it. Most of them are blood tests. This one is a home saliva test, which, it's can't make it any easier than that.
No. In fact, I just must throw out there in terms of COVID testing, there is, for those of you who are local listeners on Long Island, there's a wonderful in Hicksville saliva test that does a PCR COVID test just through saliva. So they're not putting any kind of things up your nose. That's the one I used when I was in New York. So it's so simple. You just basically spit in a little tube. If somebody wanted to get this DNA methylation test done, the kit is sent to them.
Yeah, it's a little card. It's really amazing. You just a little card with a little circle. You take a little bit of saliva, put it right in the card, send it away, and that's that. They look at your methylation patterns and they let you know. You either get good news or bad news. Hey, congratulations, you're 65, your biological age is 43, or you're 65, your biological age is 70. So you got some work to do.
Right. But that seems to me a little limited because you're only measuring one thing, right? So there's all kinds of factors, as you said, that play into this. And what if somebody has that SNP where they do have a deficient methylation pathway, and yet they eat really well, they exercise, they look fantastic? How does that all fit together?
You are spot on. That's amazing. Congratulations. I think that is the other key. There's about a third of the population that have an MTHR variant that's a folate metabolism that will impact your health, but also impacts how well you respond to taking any type of AKG, including the calcium AKG. So we are instituting a test initially to test for that. And then you can take a very simple methylfolate, but it has to be a very specific form of methylfolate. I know because I actually have that variant.
As do I.
Yeah,
As do I. That's why I know too.
Yeah. And so, it's a very inexpensive supplement that you can find. The company will probably white label a version of it, but also I think we're talking about a 2.0 product that may contain it. But, when you do these kind of testings, you have to do all sorts of stuff. You can't just put something else in there and assume it's going to be beneficial. It has to get to its targeted area. And if it is the small intestines where this really should be dissolved and absorbed and it affects the gut milieu at that level, we need to make sure that whatever we add to that gets there as well. Otherwise, there's no reason to do anything else. But
right, and those methylated Bs as well as methylcobalamin in terms of B12 and the methylfolate, they've been around for a very long while because I worked in a holistic clinic in the 1980s, believe it or not, with Dr. Serafina Corsello. I was the head nurse there for 23 years, and we were already looking into those things along with, we actually had people come like the great vitamin C researcher, Linus Pauling. We worked with him. So I've been involved in this a very long time.
Yeah, so that's a great thing for people to do. And the beauty of it, it's a simple add-on test that they can do. So when you send the DNA saliva sample in, they can just add that and you get a very nice report that talks about the different folate vitamins and whether or not you're affected, right? Because there's either one or two genes that can be homo or heterozygote, where you're either partially affected or you're more affected. But yes, I think that's something that people don't even know. That's highly effective.
They don't, and it should be addressed in medicine. It really should be, because it not only affects, like, let's say, how you look, but it is very much involved with how you feel and how much energy you have, how much youthful vigor you have, especially as we go into later years.
That's absolutely true. And that's one of the side effects I always talk about, the feels of taking AKG supplementation is somewhere around 3 or 4 weeks after I just noticed this amazing boost in what I call focused energy. As a trained surgeon, I know how to focus for hours. I always could. But you do feel fatigued if you do it over and over and over again. And as I do these multiple products and companies that I work with, it's easy to get fatigued. All of a sudden, I realized that it wasn't happening anymore. And I think the difference between that focused energy and the jittery energy that people get from caffeinated drinks and those sorts of things, it is not the same. Focused energy is calm, laser focused. And I just believe in this hectic lifestyle that we live now. That sort of thing is invaluable because we all know it doesn't matter really how fit you are. It doesn't really how smart you are. It doesn't matter how anything else is going on. But if you don't feel healthy and don't feel like you have vitality, your life just doesn't feel the same. And having something that's doing all the things inside that we know that AK can do, but then also being able to feel that you feel more youthful, you have energy. I think that's just amazing.
Fantastic information and so much, to continually learn as we move forward in time in terms of all kinds of biological processes that we can affect through our foods, through our exercise, and through targeted supplementation. Does this particular alpha-ketogluteric acid ever interfere with pharmaceuticals if people are already taking them?
Boy, that's too complicated of a topic for me to try to answer. I would
right?
What I would tell everybody as a physician, obviously, if you want to take any type of supplementation, do your research, look for real world data, which means people using it, not animal studies alone. And then if you have any questions and it doesn't make sense, or if you're on some type of medication, pick up the phone, ask your physician or your nurse. You have to ask somebody. As you know, there are no companies out there that are going to give you any type of medical advice, whether or not it's
That's
safe.
True. But who's really good? Also, pharmacists are great resources for that.
And that's a great point. Absolutely, a pharmacist. So you just need to go to a medical professional or a pharmacist and just ask them.
Well, thank you for all that great information. And thank you for being our guest today, Dr. Francis Palmer. Really interesting. And you can go to rejuvent.com or drpalmer.com for more. And we will have links on our archive if you're listening to our show live in your car today or in your house. And of course, if you're listening online, we have listeners all over the world. And thank you again, listeners, for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.